Hi guys, welcome to our latest webinar. It's about customer experience, the key to app growth. Joining me today is Ty Ratagan and Sona Sharoyan. I'll let you guys introduce yourself quickly to the audience. So Ty, if you go first.
Hi everyone. My name's Ty. I'm the GM for AppFollow in the Americas, so everything North and South America. We work directly with teams to help them get successful with their app strategy and growth. Before working at AppFollow, I worked at a company called Amplitude, and before that, Optimizely. And so have been working in the CX space specifically for digital products for almost 12 years now.
And Sona?
Yeah, nice to meet you, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Sona. I'm leading the ASO consulting team, recently renamed to Professional Services. We are helping AppFollow customers to improve their ASO strategy, review management strategy, and basically everything related to the details when it comes to RM and ASO. Prior to joining AppFollow, I've worked with mainly photo and video editing apps, particularly for Pixart. So my background is mainly in ASO, and I will be able to provide some insights when it comes to ASO and mobile marketing.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, guys. And I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Sasha, or Alexander, in the formal sense. I'm the marketing content manager at AppFollow, so I deal with all things content that you'll see on social, on our website, video, anything you can name of. I will be trying to write something valuable and useful. So I think we can start with the agenda now. What's on the agenda? So for today, we're going to be discussing customer experience as the key to app growth. We'll be introducing customer experience for mobile apps. Then we'll be moving on to user feedback as the voice of customer experience. Then we'll be moving to focused on CX, how that impacts user acquisition and user retention, how teams can collaborate to provide great customer experience. And then finally, we'll be discussing the app lifecycle and why it's required for any mobile team in today's world to master it. Cool. So first of all, what is customer experience for mobile apps? Well, the idea of customer experience for a mobile app exists really as two elements, the in-app experience and the external experiences with the app. They both impact one another. And so it's crucial that we, or you as a team, work on building them to ensure future growth and retention. From what we've been seeing in the mobile world is there's been a lot of development in regard to new innovations in customer onboarding and personalization. So this involves bringing the customer experience from almost the first time they enter the app to new levels of sophistication and immersiveness. But what interests me in particular in regards to the in-app experiences is the regular experimentation and A/B testing on the various elements of the app, including features and design. So Ty, I suppose I'll start with you. Like, how have you seen this process of regular experimenting and testing with new features working effectively for apps and their user bases, and what needs to be kept in mind when doing so to ensure you don't negatively impact the experience itself?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a common understanding that the more experiments you can run, the better the product experience is going to get over time. If you think about Amazon and Google, who really were the largest proponents of constant experimentation, they're also companies that have built incredible products and businesses. The reality is that there's also a level of fatigue that you can create when you're changing an experience all the time. And so you have to be very intentional about what you're experimenting with and how that's going to impact the customer, because there are examples where people have rolled out different experiences in a product application and seen huge drop-offs and haven't got those customers back. And so using an experimentation tool where you can easily flag features, you can roll features back quickly if the test isn't being successful or it's causing issues in the app is really important. Also, having a really tight feedback loop on how those experiments are performing is important too. So, whether that's, well, both, you should have product analytics that gives you insights into how is this experiment performing based on user behavior in our product, and then also listening to feedback from your customers and understanding, like, qualitatively, what do people think about this new experience? How's it working? Are we moving in the right direction? And so those are all really important factors when running experimentation programs.
Nice. Really interesting insight there. So thank you for that. And Sona, I suppose for you, in terms of the external experiences impacting user acquisition for both organic and paid, what do you recommend apps do when establishing that online presence and brand outside of the store to ensure that sort of growth that they're aiming for? And do you have any good examples of apps doing this really, really well in terms of number one on the right hand side?
Well, that's a good question, actually. In my experience, having some consistency when it comes to your presence, either on social media or websites or ASO, is essential, because you're providing the same experience to the users, and they get somewhat familiar with the tone of voice. So working with all the aspects that form this user experience, whether it's the App Store experience or the external, is quite important. Another thing, since we're talking about like also building customer communities, more often than not, we see that strong customer community actually results in better performance for the apps, as the customers themselves become the ambassadors. So they basically promote the app organically if they love it, and this is what should be the aim for any company, I think.
Nice, thank you for that. I think this moves on nicely to the next slide, which is discussing experience itself. What is that, and how does it sort of exist? Like, and I like to say that voice of the customer is the secret to acing CX. And how does that voice of the customer exist? Well, it exists as a form of feedback, user feedback and user reviews. So Ty, one thing I wanted to ask you, the bullet points that we have on these slides, they are only really a few examples of the sort of numerous ways in which you can utilize user feedback. But could you explain some great ways that teams that you've seen in the past or as of recently that have worked together really well to implement these sort of user feedback insights into the product roadmap?
Yeah, for sure. I think the feedback from customers and users is gold dust to product teams. Great product teams know that they need to be looking at data, but they also need to be getting qualitative feedback from their users to contextualize it. It's great to see, hey, someone did something interesting in your product, or your conversion rates went up, but like the reason for that is all kind of conjecture and hypotheses, unless you go and talk to customers and you validate the outcomes there. And so the challenge that app teams have faced in the past is, with B2B, so product teams can really easily identify who their best customers are, who their customers are who are experiencing challenges are. We have customer success managers who can make introductions to champions. Like, that feedback loop is quite easy to build and maintain over time. You can set up product advisory councils and everything else. When you're either a consumer focused company or like specifically an app owner, like, having that feedback loop with customers is really difficult. Maybe you've got, rather than like hundreds or thousands of customers, you have tens, hundreds of thousands or millions of customers. And so getting that feedback loop built is really challenging for product teams. But the need for that feedback and context is just as important, if not more so, in the consumer space. And so we've seen customers be really successful in using feedback from reviews or, you know, like social listening and other places to be able to implement that into the product roadmap, you know, identify where there's opportunities for improvement. As an example, Calm were, you know, they're a meditation app. They identified that when people set reminders in their mobile app, that they have a much higher retention rate and are significantly more likely to meditate over time. And that's something that they discovered using analytics. You know, if they're into, and it would have been really hard for them to figure that out from customer feedback because they have such a large user base. But if they're speaking to customers on a regular basis or listening to their feedback, they might identify those kind of insights and others quite easily. So that's something that we see really often. You know, another place people are looking for this type of context and feedback as well is like, you know, using analytics tools to be able to identify when someone does something interesting and then triggering emails, triggering surveys and other things to like try and get that contextual feedback as well. So both in product feedback and then also outside of product feedback and from reviews and social listening and other areas.
Yeah, that's quite a diverse sort of selection of things that you can use for that product roadmap. Especially that social listening element was an interesting one that you mentioned. So going forward, you know, the question that, you know, I've had in the past is like, what are the sort of key metrics that allows you to put your finger on the pulse of customer experience? So just to give a quick sort of list of what we've seen, some of you know, a lot of our clients track, and what we would sort of suggest as like those key metrics are things like reply effects and average store rating, user and community sentiments, customer satisfaction, CSAT, service level agreements, and customer lifetime value. And some of these will be mentioned as we progress through the webinar. But I think the sort of crux of this all is, why is all this review management and this customer support, you know, why is it so important? And I think, you know, knowing that you need to keep your rating at 4.5 or above in order to increase, you know, that conversion rate to install, to improve your ASO performance and lower acquisition costs, as well as increasing your customer lifetime value, that should be sort of obvious on paper. But Sana, the question I have for you is, how does this 4.5 or above, how does this rating benchmark, what about it that it increases conversion rate to installs and everything that's listed here in the slide?
Well, if I just refer to some research papers done in the past, there is actually like a diminishing return after this point, 4.5, 4.7, after which it doesn't really impact the customer decision whether it's 5-star or 4.7. But when it comes to the setting a benchmark, the minimum I would say should be 4.0. The ideal is 4.5 and above. And with 4.5 and above, we already see that it basically allows you to capture the users that land on your App Store page. And basically, the way to think about it is that with the increasing quality of the apps and the emerging of a lot of apps, customers do not settle for anything less than ideal, I would say. And the indicator of this quality is the app rating. So anything less than this, 3 stars, 4 stars or less, and then you're setting a signal that there are some issues with the app. And if you think about it, if you are hungry and you're looking for a food delivery app and want to download something to quickly order food, you're not going to want to spend your time thinking about this, downloading an app that has 3-star rating and trying it out when you can go for something that already proves to have a good user experience and is highly rated. And again, this impacts the conversion rates in the store, especially like with featured reviews, it's important to monitor them because it affects the conversion rates. With the high rating, it's also like you have certain reviews. This is what I'm referring to as featured reviews. When someone lands on the page, they read these reviews, they appear in front of their eyes, and this can be a deal breaker if there are a lot of negatives mentioned. So, when it comes to lowering acquisition costs, higher conversion rates result in lower costs. If you think about it, like with the same amount of impressions, if you get more installs, then this lowers your acquisition costs. So overall, a good benchmark to have and a good goal to have for every single app.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's explained a lot of the sort of big questions around that 4.5 figure that is often spoken about. I think next we naturally go on to like how CX impacts this user acquisition, and some of the sort of well-known outcomes is it, for example, can lower your, cost per acquisition. It can increase conversion rates as we've discussed, and it also helps you understand who to target and how when it comes to your paid campaigns and your ASO strategy, and as well as looking at ASO from the CX perspective. It allows you to answer why and how in your strategy, making that deeper sophistication in that development. So I think this sort of brings us on to an interesting case study that certainly that I've been sort of reading about very recently, and it's the how Playtika worked with their reviews to increase conversion rate. It's quite impressive actually, that they decided at one point to respond to 70% of reviews with 1 to 4 star rating, which created this 15% increase in conversion rates. That I think is quite a significant number. But Sona, one of the questions I had, this being said that there's that organic increase in conversion rates, with the same strategy, would that work for paid? In the sense of, if you're working with reviews and it's increasing, would that benefit paid campaigns as well?
Absolutely, there is a big correlation between that we notice between ASO paid user acquisition and overall, like if you think about it, ultimately users land on your App Store page to download the app. Therefore, they see the rating that impacts their conversion. So this is not something you should consider that only works for the organic or only works for the paid UA. It affects both of them tremendously.
Wonderful, thank you for that. And I think this goes on to the average rating, how it impacts downloads. And I think one of what we can see from this slide is that research has shown that ratings, they do play an integral role in app growth. So ignoring these stars, it's what we in the UK would call a schoolboy error. To obtain a high star rating, you need to ensure, well, one, you're providing that customer experience worthy of the stars, and failing to do so, you're missing out on this pile of downloads. Most noticeably from what we can see is that 3 to 4 star bracket. Between those, you're potentially losing up to 50% of potential downloads. Sona, I wondered if you had a sort of opinion on why that 3 to 4 star bracket is so significant in terms of the difference in downloads. Like, why do you think that difference is so significant?
Well, I think we kind of referred to this topic in the previous slides, but still, like, if you think about it, 3 stars is not perceived in this day and age as medium good. It's basically like 3 stars and beyond is considered bad experience. So if you think about it, in terms of like you mentioned schoolboy error, the way that we receive grades too, like it's I would say quite psychological. since 3-star is not an A, it's not a B, it's C and worse. So I obviously want to go for high achieving, high performance apps, so A-star apps.
So it's getting that A or A star on your report card, as it were, is the ideal. Cool. So I think this sort of moves into like retention, and as I said previously, experiences, it's where the money's at, and the retention of your customers ultimately for long term. That's the whole point of everything that you do, is keeping those customers once they're there. And I think one bad experience, I mean, that could lead to a third of your customers seeking to switch to a competitor. Some studies which have shown that. So, sadly, this whole thing, it can be an unforgiving game, especially when you're just starting to build that trust in your company and brand. I suppose the question for you, Ty, here is, how exactly does listening to user feedback contribute to that retention and contribute to the customer experience as well?
Yeah. Like you say, retention is really, having a great retention rate is the best way to grow your app. Like if you've got a leaky bucket, then you're having to pour more into it in order to be able to get the growth that you're looking to see, and ultimately that doesn't build great companies and great experiences. So retention is so important. For the best product teams, CX teams in the world, retention is generally the metric measuring their success against. And the reality is that there's two massive contributors to retention from listening to customer feedback. Number one is, hey, like, what are my customers asking for in the product? Like, are we like really in tune with their needs and building a product that they need today and the thing that they need in the future? The reality is that disruptors come along. Like, we've seen this with companies that not that long ago were small startups and are now multi-billion-dollar publicly traded companies. And the reality is that if their incumbents were listening to their users and understanding their needs, probably like they would have been able to maintain that customer base and retain those users. And so one is just like, hey, we're listening to customers and what they're asking for today and understanding what they need in the future. The other, which I think is potentially even more critical, is being really acutely aware of like, what are the kind of disaster experiences that you want to avoid? Like, if you're delivering a fantastic experience, your retention is going to be high. If you're delivering a good experience, your retention is going to be high. If you're delivering a pretty good experience, but you still have a fairly sticky product, your retention is still going to be high. But there's like disaster type experiences that users can have where that's it, they're churning and they're never going to use your product again, and they're probably going to advocate for other people to not use your product as well.
Right.
And those are the types of things that you're going to find out through the App Store reviews, because it's like a strong experience. And so we see it all the time where maybe someone has a payment decline during an embarrassing situation, like at a dinner or something like that, or you're trying to unlock a rental car and you're in the middle of a storm and you can't get in. These like kind of critical moments that a product team can listen to, and even though they might not happen all the time, they can kind of ensure they avoid, and you can really improve the retention rate that way as well. Right.
And I just following up from a point that you made about those crisis moments that can be reflected in reviews, it kind of brings us on to the next slide, which is, why it's crucial that you fix these issues or these potential issues that turn up in reviews when it comes to customer experience. And one of the example that we have here is MihoYo. They faced the wrath of an angry customer community after they released disappointing and supposedly unfair anniversary gifts to players of Genshin Impact. I don't know if anyone in the audience has heard of this situation or read about it, but the outcome, as you can see in the slide, really speaks for itself. But what's really interesting about this incident is that it highlights the importance of maintaining a reliable and fair customer experience. So Ty, looking at the sort of the graph here and what happened specifically, why do you think this crack in customer experience had such an impact that players actually took time out of their day to either leave negative reviews or update the current ones to a lower star rating?
Yeah, I'd say so. This is the dangerous thing about inverse network effects, where like network effects work in both directions. And if you have like a positive flywheel and you're building a community around your product, then like those, like you're going to build advocates and champions, and you're going to see exponential growth. And the similar thing can happen on the flip side of that if you're not like really in tune with what your users are needing and expecting from new features, new releases, that kind of thing. Like the negative feedback in that community can get out of hand and really reverse. Like a lot of our audience might be too old to remember this, but if for people that do remember Dig, the pre version of Reddit, really, they had a really similar experience where they changed the UI of their website, and they lost, I think, 70% of their users, and they never got them back. And so like it wasn't like, oh, okay, we can change it back and we're going to get them back. It's like they're gone forever. And so being really in tune with what the users need and what their expectations are of your product before you make changes is important. What the team here have done, which is great, is they kind of went out and they responded to all of these negative feedback and reviews and said, hey, we hear you. Like, we understand why you're frustrated. We care that you're giving us this feedback and we want to make a change. And they've kind of been able to reverse some of that negative network effect and start to like build trust back in the community. And so like acknowledging feedback, whether it's positive or negative, letting people know, hey, we've heard you, we care that you've given us this feedback, like we appreciate you as a user, and we're like taking this feedback on board into our roadmap and into how we release features is really important. And so they've done a great job of kind of mitigating some of those problems here.
Yeah, and I think that brings us on very nicely to the next slide, which is what they actually did to remedy the issue. So you've mentioned, Hyde, that it was a fairly successful save from the developers. They sort of implemented quite a strategic process to get back their average rating. They increased it by 0.0470, which is pretty impressive. I would say, but the issue, how they really did it was they provided all their players in the end with in-game rewards, and this resulted in 7,200 reviews going from negative to positive. They also reported any unfounded abuse in reviews, so reviews that they knew they couldn't resolve from responding to. They used report of concern to get rid of them, because ultimately it's also their reputation at hand there. And then obviously it's the overall general managing review process in which they responded to over 2,000 reviews, which led to 236 users changing their review from negative to positive. So I think that's a pretty good case to sort of present that shows how that review management can have a positive effect on this crisis that are sort of appeared. So going on to some of the key takeaways from the situation is, you need to always keep track of rating changes. You need to take, your user acquisition into account and your user expectations into account. Review and ratings, they aren't set in stone. If you get bad ratings or you're seeing a stream of negative reviews, you can change that situation around. You can also, you need to be aware that the speed in which you respond, speed is of the essence, right? People don't like to be left waiting, especially if they expect, that response as part of that player or that user community. And then lastly, it's establishing that feedback response workflow. So Ty, I just wanted to quickly follow up on this feedback response workflow. Could you expand a little bit on how this can be done, or like what that actually looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think to start with, what's really important is kind of establishing a team or a pod that like values this feedback and is going to kind of collaborate around it. And so quite often what we see is, you know, the marketing team really cares about how the product is perceived in the App Store, and also cares about the acquisition rates and conversion rates that Sona talks about. You know, the product team really wants to get that feedback, get it into their roadmap. And then, you know, the support or community team often like are the ones interacting with users and customers in public on a regular basis. And so quite often those teams will join forces on a strategy like this. And, you know, then what you're talking about is like, okay, like what types of like feedback and reviews do we want to engage with initially? Like, what's our highest priority? Like, very often what people say is, hey, like, we want to engage with the lowest reviews, like the lowest rated reviews, because we want to let people know that we've heard their feedback. We want to factor it into our roadmap. And ultimately, we hope that they change their reviews to positive ones and improve our overall rating. So that's quite often where people start. But the reality is that, hey, what a fantastic experience if you give a good rating for an application and someone says, hey, like, thank you for that. Like, we're really happy that you're enjoying using our app. If you've got feedback on like what you like the most, let us know. You know, that's an equal, you're going to create an advocate. You're going to create positive network effects for your application as well. And then it's like, hey, like, you wouldn't ignore like a message from a customer on like Facebook or Twitter, or like if someone sent you an email support ticket. And so why are we ignoring the middle ground between the two? But a lot of this can be where automation happens. So like your most negative reviews and your most positive reviews, like, you really want to reach out and let those people know that they've been heard. And for a lot of what's in the middle, you can set up automation rules. So you're tagging those reviews based on like sentiment, topics that are being covered, keywords, and then you're kind of still sending like somewhat personalized messages to those people, but you're doing it in a systematic manner, and you're doing it through the tools that your community team or support team regularly use. For instance, like if they're using Zendesk, then you can have it work through that workflow. And if the product team are using Slack, you can have the feedback go through to Slack or into Trello or wherever they want to kind of manage those reviews on their side as well.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for expanding on that. I think that's sort of given a bit more clarity on what exactly that means. So I think the next thing we really want to touch on is, how do you actually deliver this high quality customer experience at scale? It's not always easy to deliver that constant customer experience and that consistent customer experience when you're scaling in both innovation and adding team members. So that's why it's crucial that you, as Ty said, take the strain off the team with all things like automation, while still providing the expected level of support to users. So let's, for example, take our client BitMango as an example. They applied 10 auto reply rules and found, within 3 days, very, very quick positive results in use of that. 2,000 reviews covered in just 3 days. And the same with Gett. They through our review management tools, they achieved almost a 100% reply rate and surpassed the 4.5 ideal benchmark for the average rating. I mean, that's impressive stuff, and it really shows the satisfaction from users as a result. But Ty, I was actually interested to see what out of these examples caught your eye specifically, and if there's anything you'd like to sort of like touch on here.
Yeah, for sure. I think, what stands out here is Gett. I think a lot of people are familiar with the company. Huge amount of users, thousands and thousands of reviews that they're receiving around their product. Like, as I mentioned, it's good to reply to your negative reviews and your really positive reviews. Like, what they've set out to do is acknowledge user feedback and comments like they would do on any other channel, which means they're really aiming to respond to all of the reviews that they can. And I just think that is such a delightful experience to deliver to a user, to let them know they've been heard and acknowledge that feedback, whether it's positive or negative or something in the middle. We see some other companies doing that as well. So in the US, there's a company called Bird, who are like one of the first rental scooter companies. And they also have a really high reply rate for both their users and the company and the people that are charging the scooters. And aiming for, like, doing some reviews is great. Like, replying to all of your users like you would do a support ticket or a social media message, or like someone coming into your office and giving you feedback, like that's really the gold standard. And so that was the thing that stood out to me here, is that Gett are just doing a fantastic job of like valuing their user feedback and letting their users know it.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's really sort of finding what the balance is, what's best for you in your industry and as a company. It's everyone's going to have a different element of what you automate and what you respond to manually. And I think what I'd like to do here is just have a quick deep dive into looking a bit further into Bitmango's customer experience success. The fact that you can see clearly in this graph that the moment they implemented AppFollow's auto reply rules for reviews, the rating went up and the response rate roughly doubled, which is amazing stuff, really. And here the power of automation is within increasing that response rate, increasing the breadth of which you can respond to in terms of your community. So as you can see here, the use of auto replies, it provided a 48% increase in response rate, which for a lot of companies would be a game changer and something that would be much harder to achieve with just agents. So Ty, why is response rate specifically here? Like, why is that relevant?
Yeah, it's a great question. So like we kind of talked about, there's a bunch of positive effects on ratings based on the time that it takes to reply to a review. So like, if you can respond to a review within a few hours, you've got basically like an 80% likelihood of someone improving that negative rating. And so like being able to touch as many of those within a quick period of time is obviously really key to maintain a really high rating. And so that's why you see Gett's got a 4.8, Bird, who I mentioned, I think have a 4.9 on the App Store, because they're replying to people, they're acknowledging them, they're making them feel valued, and quite often the support teams are resolving those issues really quickly on the back end. And so like it's just, the reality is that you can't do all of that manually. Like many companies have tens of thousands of reviews a month, and the idea of being able to engage with all of those is just impossible. It doesn't mean that you're not valuing that user by sending them an automated message. It's just, hey, like you're getting it into a channel where you can action it by like high value knowledge workers. And so like that, I think that's something that is really key here. Like you can see that with Bitmango, most likely what's happening again is like the most negative reviews that their teams on, whether it's the product team, whether it's engineering, whether it's the support team, they're on top of that, and they're like, hey, we need to solve this problem for you. Like their most positive reviews, same thing. It's like, wow, thank you so much for this feedback. We're going to let the product team know that you love it. We're going to build more of this for you and other users like you. And then everything that's in that middle ground that's still really valuable and important to acknowledge are things that you can build rules around, and you can still have them filtered to teams, but you can filter them into their workflows so it doesn't create like a significant increase in work for the teams that you already have.
Right. Thank you for that, and giving that sort of understanding around the power of like auto replies for this specific case, and just giving another sort of idea around how this has worked in the example of Gett. It shows a number of interesting things. Firstly, it's the moment they started managing reviews through AppFollow, it created a similar effect than with Bitmango in regards to the average rating shooting up by 0.5, as well as response rate spiking. But so there's something else that we see here too. It's at the point, I think from October 2019, when the amount of reviews replied to hit its peak, so did the amount of reviews being received. So more people were actually leaving reviews and helping push the rating up further. Ty, why do you think that was? Because we didn't see that with other cases, but for this specifically, there's an interesting outcome here.
Yeah, I think like there's definitely a case where, again, with consumer companies, consumer applications specifically, there's not a ton of places where users can communicate with that company. Like if you're a B2B product team, like you're focused on creating as little distance as possible between you and your users. So like you're doing advisory panels, like I mentioned, you're meeting customers in person pre-COVID, as much as you possibly can. Yeah. And it's a fantastic experience. So like, the tools that we use on a day-to-day basis at AppFollow, like we have a direct relationship with those companies and we can give them feedback really easily. And it's a great experience. And for users, there's not really any way for them to interface with with the consumer applications that they're using. And so like, I expect in this situation, people saw, wow, like there's a conversation that's happening here at the moment. And it's really exciting for me to be able to interact with this product that I either love or that I would really like to love, but I can't at the moment because of these problems. And so there's a real opportunity for other consumer companies to like start engaging with their community in a manner like this.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And, I think Gett here is a perfect example of that. So going on to how can a team actually work together to provide that customer experience and build those that review management process in which it allows you to see the results you want to be seeing. This cycle here shows you like the ways in which feedback runs through the team and how it can be used. So as you can see, the user base provides their feedback on their experiences via reviews. Customer support are the first point of contact for these. And I think here at customer support, they do two crucial things. They reply to reviews or set auto replies to do so, but they also collect and share insights that are crucial to marketing and product. So these teams then use these insights as they do to improve the experience of the user base. So Sona, a question for you in regards to marketing. What specific insights would actually be useful from customer support that can help with targeting users for campaigns?
Well, it's not always that I would say like customer support is necessarily involved at this stage. Like just by monitoring the reviews, you get a lot of insights. So I would probably add another little arrow going from user base to marketing in this case. But basically the way you can view this is by having a system, a semantic analysis, which like we have inside AppFollow. You can get a lot of insights into the use cases of your product. So a lot of the times developers get caught up in adding new features and new functionality and promoting those. And these user reviews actually provide a lot of insight into how users actually use it, what are the features that are like the most common ones and the most popular ones. And combined with in-app analytics, you can use this to create a truly custom experience. And when it comes to ASO, we do a lot of A/B testing. So getting this information from the reviews and including them in your experiments hypothesis, then it helps to provide get the best results, I would say, when it comes to conversion rates. And also, like one of the tools that Apple recently released a couple months ago was the custom product pages. Basically, these are custom pages that you can include in your UA campaigns. And with that, we already see a tremendous impact on the conversion rates. And when you get this insights from users and you create custom pages and target new users with that, then you can actually both increase the conversion rates, lower the CPI, and overall affect the organic too. So in this case, that's one use case that I would mention. And another one that I would like to mention is that customers can get very creative in the way they use the products. And in particular, from my experience with photo and video editing apps in the past, since they have all the tools necessary to create something new, you see all these trends emerging on social media, and these trends can die out very quick if you do not actually respond to them. But if you have a huge response plan, trend response plan with a lot of the marketing departments, product teams involved, then you can actually leverage this insights to create a ripple effect and enhance these trends.
Right. I mean, in a way that kind of explains how, in some ways, how product also uses, especially with those insights and those kind of things. So I think what I'd like to show now is one case study that I've been looking at recently, which is Gram Games. Now, how they built their cross-team CX strategy is quite interesting, and it sort of exists as a 5-step strategy. Ty, I kind of wanted to get your insight on this, because number one here, we've got broke down silos between support and product, and it kind of feeds into the previous slide in terms of how product and customer support and the user base, how they sort of interact. But in terms of breaking down the silo, why is this a step that they've included in their strategy?
Yeah, and it's a fantastic one. Like we mentioned earlier, like it's really valuable when people kind of create a joint workforce to review, to manage their reviews and like understand them better. In this case, you know, the reality is that the amount of user feedback that they're going to be getting, whether it's through the App Store, whether it's through support tickets or wherever else, is going to be of a volume that it's not really possible for the product team to ingest it all, like process it, ingest it, onto it in the way that like a B2B team would. And that's just the nature of having such a large user base. And so being able to collaborate with support, who are the ones that are likely receiving a lot of this feedback already, how like working with them to like set up either automated tagging and analysis or like manual tagging and analysis so that it can feed through to the right places for the product team, have product team glean like the most valuable insights and factor it into prioritization in the roadmap, and then like kind of do that feedback loop on the way back as well, where they can kind of provide that feedback to the support team, who can get it back to the people that sent those reviews or support tickets in the first place. It's just like so important in order for this to be able to be successful over time, because the reality is that everyone's busy, and although this stuff's really important, it isn't a product manager's full-time job. So like other things come up and this might become less of a priority. Whereas if it's in the support team workflow and it fits into the product team workflow, then this is something that they're going to be able to sustainably do for a really long time.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And, it kind of explains why they put that as number one in their strategy. I also want to bring up sentiment analysis quickly, because we've mentioned it a number of times. But what exact value does sentiment analysis provide to a product team, especially in a sort of strategy like this?
Yeah, I like as I kind of touched upon, you can categorize feedback manually, but if you're a company that's getting thousands of pieces of feedback on a regular basis, it's really difficult to weigh through that and find the most critical and insightful pieces of feedback. And so there's multiple different tools that you can use to be able to like categorize that feedback and put it in, prioritize it in places where you can kind of analyze and glean insights. And so one of those is looking at the sentiment of the language overall. So like, was it like, what is it, positive, negative? Next thing is like, what are people saying in this? Is it to do with like bugs? Is it to do with sticking points in the application, the user experience? Then like even better, like phrase analysis, like what are people actually saying, and like what does that mean, and like can you attribute that to specific features or releases or like characters in a game, for instance? There's and so like being able to take all of that volume of feedback and chop it down into different areas. All of it should be looked at, but in what order and in what priority. Like those are things that can also be automated. And so that's what we see a lot of our customers doing, is really automating that ingestion and categorization and analysis of all of this great feedback, so that then the product teams can review it, or the marketing teams can review it in a way that isn't too labor intensive and manual.
Yeah, right, exactly. So yeah, I mean that's a great sort of outline of sentiment analysis and what it can do. And as part of that, sentiment analysis being part of the app life cycle itself, how you actually apply your CX strategy depends on what actions you're taking, and we like to sort of see it as a sort of circular motion of researching, initiating, implementing, managing, and then growth. So this cycle really outlines what you can do to apply and manage that CX. And then I think on the next slide here, we're sort of breaking down that app life cycle into its own individual steps. So Ty, what exactly from here and from what does AppFollow do to provide that help for our users to meet steps 1 to 4 in this life cycle?
Yeah, and I love that you kind of displayed it as a loop, because it is like a self feeding process where really like the things that when you scale and grow some of these efforts, like the data and feedback that you get only improves the research and through the process. And so thinking about it like a loop is really important. What we're really focused on is, hey, like listening to your users, gathering that feedback, identifying insights, also listening to what not your users, like your competitors' users, like other applications in the market are saying about their products as well, and being able to like form a strong hypothesis, not just around like your roadmap, but like what's the market's roadmap and where are there other opportunities. And so AppFollow is something that's really focused on there. And then like as you're forming these hypotheses, being able to like get those like broken down, prioritized, get them into the right tools so that you can kind of like get them on the roadmap. Like I say, whether that's like a product management tool, whether that's something you're just sending those through to Slack or whatever the workflow is, like sending through to Zendesk for ticket management. Then what you're doing in this case, you have a hypothesis, you're experimenting, you're rolling out some of these tests like we talked about, and you're quickly looking for feedback. One of the things that's great about our product is that you can filter by releases. And so you can look really quickly at all of the reviews that are coming in on a new feature release that you make. You can have them go through to a Slack channel that's high priority for the engine product team. And it's like when you ship a new feature, like for the first couple of days, the team's just on that, watching every review that comes in around that release. And they just check, okay, are people talking about any bugs? Like, are there any issues? Just having a really tight feedback loop around that implementation, and then like, as I mentioned, having everything in a workflow where you can manage it, where you can send it through to the right places, where you can acknowledge the feedback, and then like making that into a workflow that like can be automated, can like be invested in. Like Sona talked about, like if you're doing a great job of this process so far, you're going to improve your rating, you're going to improve your conversion rate, you're going to improve your organic acquisition, which is going to lead to more customers, which is going to lead to more feedback, which is going to lead to more opportunities to build great things for them. And so this is like a really positive cycle that we're excited about for our customers.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Ty. And I think that sort of finishes up the presentation so far. So I think next is, does any of you guys in the audience have any questions for our experts here? Please leave it in the questions tab on the bottom right. We've got a couple of minutes to answer some questions. So if you have any, leave them. You can leave them now and we can answer them. Or if none appear, then we can end it in the next minute or so. And leave you guys to the rest of your day. I think no. Well, I think there was a question at the beginning about if we're going to have a recording of the webinar. Yes, we'll be sharing a recording of this. We'll also be sharing the presentation with you guys via email, and we'll be adding some other resources to that follow-up email as well, just to give you more of an insights around the case studies that we presented in the presentation, and that very interesting crisis management situation with Genshin Impact, which I always like to talk about with when it comes to these things. Oh, I think we have. Oh, thank you. Yes, have a great day too. Thank you for coming to the webinar. I think we'll end it here because it seems like no one's got any questions. If you've got any questions, please feel free to contact us. You can. We're always open for discussing various different things, whether it's with your customer success manager or support. We're open for questions and more conversations around that. So anyway, thank you two for doing this webinar and presenting all this information. And I hope you have a great day. All right, bye guys.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.